The night Ethan Carter returned to Seattle, rain traced thin lines across the taxi window. And he felt the old ache he had never fully named because he knew the city still held the one memory he had tried to outrun. And across town, unaware of his arrival, Claire Bennett stood alone in her small apartment, staring at a packed box she had refused to seal for years. Both of them suspended at the edge of choices they had delayed for too long. And years earlier, they had met by accident at a quiet bookstore near Pike Place Market when Claire dropped a stack of novels and Ethan knelt to help her. Their hands brushing in a simple moment that somehow stayed, and they talked easily, laughed, without effort, and found comfort in small shared truths like loving long walks, black coffee, and songs that felt like confessions. And what began as gentle friendships slowly turned into something deeper as seasons passed and their bond grew through late-night calls, shared dreams, and silent understanding. Yet timing was never kind, because Ethan carried the weight of ambition and fear of staying still while Claire held on to stability and the quiet hope of building a life rooted in one place. And when Ethan received a job offer in New York, it cracked open the fragile balance between them, neither wanting to say the words that could change everything. So they spoke carefully, danced around their feelings, and convinced themselves that distance would be temporary and manageable. But distance stretched days into months and months into years, and calls became shorter, then rarer, until silence settled like dust on everything they had not said. And Claire told herself she was fine as she focused on her career in community arts, helping others find expression while ignoring the empty chair at dinner and the echo of a voice she still heard in songs. While Ethan chased success across cities, telling himself that achievement would fill the space he had left behind. Yet every milestone felt hollow because it was never shared with the one person who had once believed in him without conditions. And on the night of his return, Ethan stepped out into the wet street and felt the city breathe around him, familiar and unforgiving, reminding him that running had not erased the past. It had only postponed it. And as he walked past the bookstore, now closed and dark, memories rose sharply, forcing him to admit that he had come back not for work or family, but because something unfinished kept pulling him home. And across town, Claire finally taped the box shut, deciding it was time to move forward, having accepted a position in Vancouver that promised a fresh start. Yet, as she sat on the floor surrounded by half-packed memories, a sudden knock at the door startled her, her heart racing for reasons she could not explain, because hope had learned to be quiet inside her. And when she opened the door to only find a neighbor with a misdelivered package, disappointment washed over her stronger than she expected, revealing the truth she had tried to bury, that some part of her was still waiting, and later that night, unable to sleep, she walked outside into the rain, letting the cold clear her thoughts. Unaware that only a few streets away, Ethan stood under a streetlight, holding his phone, staring at her name, knowing that one call could change everything or reopen wounds he had once caused. And he hesitated because he understood now that love was not just about feeling. It was about timing, courage, and the willingness to stay. And as the rain fell harder, both of them stood at separate corners of the same city, closer than they had been in years, yet separated by silence, choices, and the question of whether love given a second chance could survive the truth of the first. And in that fragile pause, the past leaned toward the present, waiting to see who would move first. Morning came with pale light and restless thoughts, and Claire woke with the strange feeling that something had shifted during the night, even though nothing visible had changed. And as she moved through her routine, coffee tasted flat and time felt uneven, because the past seemed closer than it had in years. And across the city, Ethan sat in a quiet cafe, watching steam rise from his untouched mug as he finally accepted that fear had shaped too many of his choices. And without allowing himself another excuse, he sent a short message to Claire, simple and honest, saying he was back in Seattle and hoped they could talk. And when Claire's phone buzzed, her breath caught as she read his name, the letters. Stirring emotions she had tried to settle, and she stared at the screen for a long moment, weighing years of silence against the truth of her heart. Before replying with a cautious yes, agreeing to meet at the waterfront where they once spent long evenings talking about life. And the hours before the meeting passed slowly, filled with memories and quiet questions about who they had become. And when they finally saw each other across the open space by the water, the world seemed to narrow to that single moment, because time had changed them, but not erased the familiarity in their eyes, and their greeting was gentle and unsure, marked by smiles that carried both warmth and restraint. And they walked side by side, speaking carefully at first, sharing surface details about work, cities, and routines, until silence invited deeper truths. And Ethan admitted that success had not brought peace, and that leaving without clarity had been his greatest regret, while Claire confessed that staying had not meant moving on because some hopes lingered quietly even when ignored. And as the wind moved across the water, they spoke of missed calls, unsent messages, and the way distance had magnified misunderstandings, realizing that neither had meant to hurt the other. Yet both had been shaped by the choices made in fear, and the honesty between them felt heavy but cleansing. It's like rain after a long dry season, and for a moment, laughter returned as they recalled small memories that still belonged only to them, reminding them of how easily connection once flowed. And as the sun dipped lower, casting warm light across the waves, Ethan asked the question he had carried since returning: whether there was still space in her life for him, not as a memory, but as someone willing to stay. And Claire felt the weight of her upcoming move pressing against that question, because she had built plans to protect herself from disappointment. And she shared her intention to leave for Vancouver, hoping for a clean beginning, and the words landed between them with quiet impact. Not as a rejection, but as a reality shaped by caution. And Ethan listened without argument, understanding that love could not ask for sacrifice without offering certainty. And as they stood there, both aware that time was limited, they faced the truth that wanting something did not always mean being ready to claim it, and they parted with a soft embrace that carried more meaning than any promise, agreeing to take a day to reflect before deciding what came next. And as Claire walked away, she felt both lighter and more unsettled, because reopening the past had revealed how deeply it still mattered. And Ethan remained by the water, watching her leave, knowing that the next choice he made would define whether his return marked an ending or a beginning. And as night settled over the city once more, both of them lay awake, caught between comfort and risk, understanding that love, when given another chance, demanded courage not just to speak, but to choose differently than before. The next day moved quickly, yet every moment felt weighted with meaning. And Claire spent the morning walking through her neighborhood, noticing small details she had once overlooked. As if the city was quietly asking her to decide what she wanted to carry forward, while Ethan sat in his rented apartment, drafting and deleting messages, realizing that words alone would not be enough this time, because action was what he had avoided before. And as the afternoon arrived, they met again. This time at the old park, where trees lined a quiet path and benches held memories of past conversations. And there was less hesitation now, because the space between them had already been crossed by honesty. And Ethan spoke first, admitting that he had built his life around moving forward without ever standing still long enough to commit, and that coming back had shown him what he had lost by choosing ambition over connection. And Claire listened, recognizing the growth in his voice, yet also aware of her own changes, because she had learned independence, resilience, and the value of protecting her heart. And she shared how years of waiting had taught her not to rely on hope alone, but to trust consistency and presence. And the conversation deepened as they acknowledged the pain they had caused each other without blame, understanding that love could fail not from lack of feeling, but from lack of courage. And as they walked the path together, their steps fell into an easy rhythm, reminding them of how natural it once felt to move side by side. And laughter surfaced again, lighter this time as they spoke about who they were now rather than who they had been. And Ethan surprised Claire by saying he had declined a new offer that would take him away again, explaining that for the first time he wanted to choose a life that allowed room for relationships, not just achievements. And the admission stirred something hopeful yet cautious within her. Because promises had once been easy and endings hard, and she told him about her fear of reopening wounds, about the quiet strength she had built alone, and how leaving for Vancouver felt like choosing herself, not running away, and Ethan respected that truth, telling her he did not expect her to change her plans without trust being rebuilt. And they agreed that if anything was to begin again, it would need patience, honesty, and time, not urgency driven by fear of loss. And as evening approached, they sat on a bench watching children play and couples pass by, both aware of how ordinary life continued even during moments of deep personal change. And Claire admitted that part of her still loved him, not as he was before, but as the man standing beside her now. And Ethan felt the weight of those words, knowing they carried both invitation and warning. And instead of pressing for an answer, he asked if they could start with something simple, like shared time and open communication, allowing the future to unfold naturally. And Claire agreed, feeling relief in choosing a path that did not require immediate certainty, and they parted, with a sense of quiet agreement, not defined by labels or promises, but by intention. And as Claire returned home, she reopened the sealed box, not to unpack fully, but to reconsider what leaving meant when something worth exploring still remained. And Ethan walked through the city with a calm he had not felt in years, understanding that love was not about grand gestures, but about showing up consistently. And that night, as both lay in separate rooms, the silence felt different, no longer heavy with regret, but filled with a fragile possibility of something being rebuilt carefully, step by step. Days passed with a steady rhythm, and Claire and Ethan met often without rushing meaning into every moment, sharing walks, meals, and quiet conversations that slowly rebuilt trust through consistency rather than promises. And Claire noticed how Ethan listened now, fully present, no longer distracted by the next opportunity, while Ethan saw how Claire carried herself with confidence shaped by years of self-reliance. And as time moved forward, they spoke openly about fears and hopes, allowing space for uncertainty without letting it rule their choices. And when Claire finally told Ethan that her move to Vancouver was still possible but no longer felt like an escape, he supported her honesty, saying that love should never demand someone abandon growth, and that if their connection was real, it could survive patience and distance handled with care. And this acceptance deepened what they were building because it replaced pressure with respect. And one evening by the water, under soft lights and calm air, Claire shared her realization that she no longer wanted a life defined by what might go wrong, and that staying, at least for now, felt like choosing courage, not comfort. And Ethan responded not with celebration, but with gratitude, promising presence rather than perfection. And they agreed to move forward slowly, grounded in reality rather than fantasy. And as weeks turned into a season, Claire declined the Vancouver offer, choosing to invest in what was growing where she stood, while Ethan reshaped his career locally, proving through action that staying was not a temporary decision. And challenges still arose, moments of doubt and miscommunication, but they faced them directly, learning that love strengthened through effort and honesty, not avoidance. And the city became a shared backdrop once again, filled with new memories, layered gently over old ones. And one quiet morning, Claire realized that the box she once packed now held nothing she wanted to leave behind, and Ethan understood that success felt richer when shared with someone who knew his past and believed in his future. And though neither claimed certainty about forever, they found peace in choosing each other in the present, understanding that real love was built not on dramatic returns or perfect timing, but on daily decisions to stay, listen, and grow together. And as the seasons changed, they walked forward side by side, not chasing what was lost, but creating something steady, mature, and real. Rooted in the simple truth that sometimes the bravest ending is not walking away, but staying and building something new where the heart feels at home.